Okay, as you can see, we're up to doing our sewing around our journals now. Now, because I've got the overhead on, you're not really going to see what I'm doing because the top obviously is in the way. But just a couple of things I'll just point out. I've zigzagged around the edge of that. Now, I don't tend to do a lot of back stitch on paper. Well, really not that much back stitch on anything. I think it's just my personal choice. I know it gets a little bit dark and thick where I backstitch, and it can tend to tear the paper. So what I do is I start and I finish as close as I can together. So then with sewing, you've got 2 threads on the top and 2 on the bottom. So what I do is because you can't just leave them, it'll fray. Now, if I can get you a look at this. So on the back, can you see that I'll get our threads over here. So we'll work with this one first. Sewing stitches work in a series of loops, as you know. The needle goes down and loops the underneath. So when you finish and you pull it out, there's actually, if you pull on that thread, you will pull through a loop. So you put your your stiletto, your awl in that loop, and that will bring the thread through to the back. So now we'll get the other one, and if we pull on it, the right one, you will see that loop come in. So then we just pull that loop through, because that's actually the thread that's on the other side. Now once we've done that, all I do is I get 2 and 2, and I just tie a couple of knots, and then this is right on where the spine will be, the journal will be sewn in, so you won't actually see this. And the same could be said if you want to just do a back stitch at the beginning and the end, that's fine too. This is just probably an extra little unnecessary step that I do because I'm doing me, but a back stitch will do the same thing if you're happy with that. So then I tie that off. But then what I like to do is because I cut the threads down low, I just put a little bit of glue in on that knot. So that knot is going nowhere, and by doing that, that's it. I grab my little scissors and I cut the tails right back in near the knot. Now because I have got glue there sitting on that knot won't undo. So I just hold that down there just to get it to take. So then we can cut this thread right back to just above the knot itself, and that glue will hold that knot in. That's not going anywhere. So then on the front, it's hard, you can't see where I've actually stopped sewing about there, so it's very hard to see where I've stopped sewing. That little extra step makes me happy. It could drive you insane. So that I am going to go off and do the rest of the journals, because you don't need to hear and see me do the sewing. Now just a couple of things, if I may, I'll point out. We all know not to sew over wet glue. That's a given. If you do, that's fine, but don't expect your machine to last as long as what it could. If you do, it's entirely up to you. But what happens is when you sew over glue, the needle goes down through your fabric, down through your paper, but it's also going down through that glue. So even though it's tiny, minute little bits of glue hitting your needle that you can't see, you're picking up that glue and that gum, and you're pushing it down into the machine every time you do a stitch. It like I said, if you want to sew over it, by all means. The other thing too is I find when I'm sewing with paper, every machine's got feed dogs, and what that means is it feeds the fabric through. It's got a little bit of a grip on your fabric, and it holds it steadier for you to be able to push your fabric through, and you don't get as much wriggling. With paper, I've found, because it's smooth, because it hasn't got any sort of nap, it hasn't got anything for the feed dogs to grip onto. So when you're sewing with paper, you need to actually hold the paper as you're putting it through, not forcing it, but just keep pressure on what you're sewing, because it will wriggle everywhere. And even though that I've been sewing for all but 7 years of my life, it took me a little while, and I still sew quite crooked on paper at times because my mind wanders and I'm not holding the paper properly. And what I've also done too is this little bit of washi tape, so that is lined up with where I want these journals to go through. So I not only have it, because I normally sew with a 1/4 inch foot, or a 3/4 foot, depending on whether it's patchwork or clothing. So I wasn't able to get a straight line fix on this to begin with. I think I'm right now, but that little bit, what that means is if I've got my sewing lined up on that there, I'm going to have a straight line. The other thing you do is you don't look where the needle is. Don't look at the needle. Look at here. Look along here. This is where you want your whatever you're doing, so your journal cover, to go through. You keep your eyes down here, on here, and it's the same no matter whether or not you're following that or whether you're following the side of your foot. You don't look at the needle. The same way when you're cutting something, you don't look where your blade is down here. You watch where you want to go. So theoretically, and I fail at this regularly, if this is your end point where my hand is, your eyes should be on that end point, and then your scissors will be doing its thing while you keep your eye up here, and theoretically, girls, you will have a straight cut. That takes some practice and just mind memory to remember to do that. When I remember to do it, I cut in a straight line. Unfortunately, I don't always remember, and I can cut as crooked as the best of them. So that's it. That's my little handy hint. I forgot to mention, because we're sewing something that's got quite a bit of fluff to it, you need to be taking your bobbin case out and giving it a bit of a clean or a vacuum, and just to keep it all nice and clean, because sooner or later it'll get so clogged up it's not going to, your thread coming out of your bobbin is not going to work. So make sure that you keep that a little bit clean, and everybody will laugh at me when I say I think between 5 and 8 hours is a good job for one needle. It does, the metal does fatigue, the point on the needle blunts, and does so quicker with paper. For my fabric, it's every 8 hours. I try to remember every 5. So I've got 10 of these journals to do. This needle is in here, so I will more than likely change that needle at the end of this sewing job. You don't have to wait for a needle to break to change it. You get better results if you keep your needle swapped out all the time. And the other thing too is listen to how your needle goes through the paper. Make a point of knowing what that sound is like, because I've knocked the point off a needle I've been using and you can actually hear the needle punching through what it's trying to sew. It makes a distinctive noise that is different from what normally it will make. It just, so instead of it sliding down through, it's actually punching its way into whatever you're sewing, and that's where you start getting wonky stitches and trouble with your machine. So that's probably about it for me on the machines. Carry on and do it however you'd like to do, but there are just a few little things that I probably just are a bit weird, that just relates to me. So I will go away. And did you actually see? No. So I'll start this off and then I'll pause or do a sped up portion, and then I am going to pop over and I'm going to have Celeste as company while I'm sewing these today, and we'll go from there. So I'll start it off and you'll see it coming out there, and we'll go from there. So there we have the beginnings of. Now with everything I just said, you can actually see where I've gone a little bit crooked there. Once upon a time I would have had conniptions about that and I would have unpicked it, but I will be cutting back a little bit to the stitching when I'm finished. So with everything that you can put in place, you can still do a little bit crooked, but it's okay. So every time I come to a change in direction, I try and get it. So I've got to go this way. Try and get it so that it's as close to what the rest is. There we go. Now if you're new to sewing and you don't have complete faith in your ability to control your foot, another way that you can do it is you can just move your move your wheel. So your wheel's over here, here's your wheel. If you're wanting to get it within a stitch of where you want the new row to be, if you're unsure about pressure with your foot and how to just get a stitch, just wind this forward, and you can bring through a stitch without having to worry about foot control, pedal control. threads out of the way. Now this one here, there isn't enough thread there for me to be able to tie that off, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unpick that a little bit until I get enough thread to be able to tie it off with the rest of them. So once again, these are all just little things I do that take time that you don't have to worry about if you don't want to. Almost there. This little stiletto's got a little barb on the end of it and it's catching. Okay. That will give me enough thread to hang on to tie it off. And sometimes you get really, really lucky and you get your stitches to line up exactly. Doesn't always happen, trust me. So there you go, there's the next cover. So that's done. What do I do with the insert? Now I've done a couple that are just a little bit different, not really hugely, but because I've done them a little bit different, and so I just don't go crazy and forget that I want to do this differently. So this is actually a Kaiser Craft paper, a sheet of wrapping paper, and calico on the inside, the fabric lined inside. Now I'm putting a pocket on both these ends, so I'll just show you what I do here, and then I might even speed some of this up. So what I want to do is first of all, I want to sew down the edges of the pockets. Now the reason for doing it this way is this pocket, when I stitch around it, it'll be stitched down and you won't be able to get in there to do that sewing. So I'll just do these two, and then there's one other step, and then we just go back to doing this the way we do all of them. So now I've done that, the next thing that will make it a lot easier, I'm going to set an eyelet either in the front or the back. So that's my front. So do I want it there, or do I want it to come from behind? I think with this one I'll do it from behind, because the other ones, so I've got 8.5, so 4 1/4 about. Maybe about there. And that should be about halfway. So then I'm doing the 3/16, the larger one on the crocodile. So then I'll put this in here. I've got my hole there. Now if I've got a brad that will... Not really. So... brown one. So I'll put that one there. Ah! Okay, so I'll chip it up this way again. Oh, you know what I've done, don't you? I've put it in there. It needs to be out here. That's okay. So what I might do is I've made a mistake. So I am going to try and, I don't know, trying something. So I'll bring it in. I'll bring it into there. So what's that? That's an inch in. Bring it an inch in. And you can see there my thread's got tangled up. Now what we can do is this is going to be closed over. So if we can get the thread a little bit untangled. Okay, so it's the tail. So we can cut that. Because what we can do is instead of having to tie it in a knot, so that's just the tail that got caught up. I didn't hang on to it. So we don't have to actually tie this one off. We just bring them both through to the inside. And then we can just put a little bit of glue there because we can keep the tails in here because it's being folded over. So just put a bit of glue down there. So once that dries, those threads aren't going anywhere. I do fuss, but this is the way I do it. You don't have to do any of this, just do your back stitch like I kept saying, but we don't have to worry about trying to do a knot because that's getting folded over. So now because I've done an oops, I've created more work for myself, but that's okay because we'll turn an oops into something very pretty and extra on this one. I've got a thread that doesn't want to play the game here. It's summer here, as everybody knows. I do have the fan going on in the background if you can hear that, but I think I'm going to have to put the aircon on. I thought I might have been. It's fairly overcast. I think we're supposed to be getting storms and a bad weather event coming through, but I guess this is the build up to it. So there you are. So if I just stop fussing with that and give it a chance to take. So that's that one there. So now what I want to do is I've put this, as you can see, I put that on the edge and it should be on the outside here. So my thinking now is I will put another eyelet here and an eyelet here, and we'll just do a decorative ribbon on it, on the face of the, we'll put something nice there and we'll turn it into a feature. That's me not thinking. So we want to punch another hole here, and hopefully I'll line them up straightish, and then we'll put another one here. The other thing we could have done is we could have just hang on a minute. The other thing we could have done is because this is a pocket, we could have just cut it off there and had no pocket at all at the back. But why would I want to simplify my life? So we'll grab another. As you can see my thought process if I've mucked something up. So now what I need to do actually, I'm thinking something there, but it has to go through both of them, which is pretty thick. Let me think for a minute. Okay, so I've put a couple of extra brads at top, one at the top, one at the bottom, because I made a mistake. So I'm going to put something in there and turn that into a feature. Now I have punched the hole for the eyelet that I want the tie to be on, but I'm just going to hold off putting that in there because I think it'll foul on the pressure foot of the sewing machine as I go through. So I will get everything else sewn around here. And where can I put this where I won't use it? I know, bit of a joke. So I just made that a lot more complicated than it needed to be, but that's in par with who I am. So now before I start, just to get rid of all the loose threads, I will pull all these through and deal with them before I start the next one. So that's actually knotted a little bit there, so that's good. So we'll just pull that over, cut it, run some glue along it. There we go. I'll put a little bit more there. And that was it. They're all done. So I'll just pull the threads through and tie these off, and then we can go trim around the outsides and start sewing the signatures in. It's quite exciting. Do a little bit of inking. It's exciting when it all comes together, because it all does take time. It takes time. But it's a good way. This is a good way for me to spend my time. And for those of you who would like to have a journal and would like to decorate it and have ephemera, well, this is your chance. If you don't have lots of different, because when you're doing these things, I do, and all of us do have quite a bit of stuff laying around us, like all the different paper variety and, you know, the sewing machine and the threads, like it all comes at a cost, and it takes lots of little things to put one big end product together. So if you're a card maker, or if you've never made a journal before, you can either watch this and hopefully it will help you to make your own, if that's what you would like. But if you're not 100% sure whether or not you actually really want to make journals, you make other things and do other things, or whether or not you just want. So this will be, let's say, for sale, and they will be blank. I will not be putting any ephemera in these, but there will be ephemera in the shop for you to buy. So that's it. Got it all sewn up. So now what I want to do is I'll just go around, and I don't mind if it frays. I think it just adds to the character of it. So I'm just going to cut it back just a little bit, because you don't want to be cutting through your stitching, and just sort of like even it up a little bit, like where I might have just been a little bit too far in, and we'll cut around. So that side actually looks pretty good. And there we are. So that's that one sorted. So now we will just grab what we need to ink. I think I'll stick with the Distress Oxide Vintage Photo, and I need a new just do the edges. So that's that one done. So that's ready for a signature. So it goes this way. Make sure I've got it up. I'll probably check that again before I sew it in. I've got to seat those. Oh, that's the other thing we can do while we're here. Thanks, Cody. So when have we got? We've got just under 7 by the look of it. So if I just put that across there, we'll make it 7. So if I make this 3.5, I'll put that there. Let's have a look and see. Oh, that's pretty good. So this one's ready for the signature to go in. Just make sure that it's all right. That's one, and then everybody, this is ending this. Louie, please don't. That is ending this part of the construction. So now I've got 10 that look like this that I will have to start sewing in the signatures next. So let me just finish off with this one. I think this is part 2, so part 3 will be coming up. Okay, take care everybody. Be kind to yourself and each other. Bye for now.